Welcome to Momentum Mode. My name is Corey Farringle, and you'll hear me alongside my co-host Mike Shannon shortly. This episode will feature an interview with Ira Weiss, a founding partner of Hyde Park Venture Partners. Not only is Ira a longtime venture capitalist, but he's also served on the boards of many companies and is the venture capital professor at University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. We'll cover a wide range of topics such as how a board evaluates a CEO, what investors look for in companies and leadership teams, and also how board members communicate with one another. But before we jump in, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Kilpatrick, Townsend & Stockton, an innovation-focused law firm with 22 offices around the world, including our hometown of Chicago. Also, thanks to Mike's company Improve and Corey's company Aperion Ventures for their support of the pod. Now to the episode. Welcome back, and we have a returning guest, Ira Weiss, who is a professional, not only educator, but investor and board member, and here to help us with more understanding of what does it mean from a board member's perspective, what does it mean if you're an executive, and how the board members are thinking and what they're doing. And I guess where we want to start, Ira, is what are you looking for when you're looking to make an investment? And through Hyde Park Venture Partners, how many investments do you think you've made over your decade plus of involvement, founding and involvement?
Probably maybe 60 investments.
60. So if you've made 60 investments, you're probably looked at 500 companies.
Yeah, probably quite a bit more than that.
More than that, right?
Yeah.
So you've looked at tons of companies out there. What do you look for in a CEO? Like, when you walk in and you walk out of that meeting and you go, that's the person, or sometimes yes right away and sometimes no right away, or in between. Like, what do you look for?
Well, there's lots of things that would be nice to have.
Okay.
But I think one of the most important things is just persistence.
Yep.
Feeling like, look, is this person persistent in what they've done before? And unless it's someone like really early and just out of school, I like to see someone who's had at least some amount of success in one thing that they've done before.
Yep.
So those are two of the things that I really like to see. I mean, there's lots of other things I hope for. We tend to do more business to business type investments. So I like people who have deep domain expertise and, maybe even lived the pain point that they're trying to solve.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, from a personality and characteristic standpoint, the most important thing is persistence. And then I would say quickly followed by a sense of curiosity, because I think though, if you put those two together, that's how people can, at least my sense is founders can go really, really far.
So when you say some level of success, what is that? What would dictate success, demonstrate that to you?
I mean, it literally could be as simple as they were an analyst at in some job and they got promoted to the next level.
Okay.
They don't need to be like, I'm glad you asked. It's not like a wild amount of success.
Yeah.
But I have to say, when you're just getting to know people and you don't know them at all, it's nice to know that there's like some basic level of competence.
Yep.
And so, if someone has referred you to them and they say, look, I worked closely with this person before, and this person was one of the best people that I've ever worked with before,
yep,
then I already have, that knowledge. But for a lot of the founders that we look at, we have no real direct connection to them.
Yep.
And therefore, if they've done something before, and that maybe that could be manage their, a little league team or something.
Yeah.
Now, some degree of success, to interject on that, a lot of failure happens in startups. So let's say a founder came to you, they had 6 years persisting in a startup, but it failed. How would you coach that founder to present themselves for the next round of funding on the next company if it failed?
Well, so that's a great question. And I actually also like that background.
Yeah.
Which is someone who has had a prior company and they work really hard at trying to make that a success. So when I talked about success, it's not necessarily financial success or success for a business that they were involved in. It's more like, it's just, honestly, it's a level of competence that I'm like, okay, this person, they do what they say and they say what they do. And so you also have some experience with them over time where you're starting to get to know them as a founder, and they say, look, I'm going to do these two things and this is what we're working on. And then a couple weeks later, those two things are done. So the success, when I think of success, it's more like, is someone productively, and I'm pretty confident they can productively move the ball down the court.
Yep.
And you learn, frankly, in many cases, you learn more from failure than you do from success.
Yep.
And so I am excited if someone had started a company before, whether it was successful or not successful. And ideally it was like a mild success, but not a smashing success.
Yeah.
That they still have a lot of hunger, or it was a failure and they have an understanding of what, of the things that they learned, and that will be helpful for the next venture that they're working on.
So how much does validation, if they come to you and say a new potential investment comes and says, well, we've got this other investor already agreed, whether we have a term sheet or, statement of terms for the deal from this other investor, how important is that? They have some sort of blessing from another investor.
Well, it is always a good sign.
Yep.
It's not, our firm ends up, we lead a lot of the investments that we make. And
meaning you're the ones writing the terms, the first
exactly.
one.
We're the ones writing the terms. We're the ones, kind of leading the financing round, putting together all the financial terms, negotiating the terms with the founders.
Yep.
But if somebody tells me that they already have X investor lined up and they're looking to fill out the round, that always makes me want to work quicker, want to work more diligently, want to get to know them quicker, because I know there's a time frame. It also means somebody else has spent their time and effort looking at this,
right,
and feels like this has a good, has a reasonable chance of success. And so that is a really good sign, but it's not necessary.
So do you ever find a situation where someone comes and says, oh, I want to work with this other investment firm, venture capital, private, whatever, typically venture capital in your world, and you go, we don't like them, that other firm?
I don't remember anything exactly like that.
Yeah.
There are definitely groups that we've worked with that we've really enjoyed working with.
Yep.
And, I think if somebody comes with a fund and says, this is the other fund that's involved, and we've had a good experience with them before, that would be a big positive sign.
And so when you say you enjoyed, what makes it enjoy working with other investors?
Well, if they add value and are not, destructive.
Okay.
So if they, do things that are helpful to the company, they don't take up too much of the company's time unless they can add value. They follow on, new financing round comes. There's many cases where companies, don't always hit the milestones they may need for a next financing round. Is it a group that we know will support the company because we're going to support the company?
Yep.
So, and not every venture fund, some venture funds will see enough of a movie if they're involved and be like, we have reserves, but maybe not enough. We don't want to allocate the reserves for this company. And we always give our entrepreneurs as many chances as we possibly can. So we definitely want to know someone who's going to be supportive of the company come hell or high water, because it just makes our life easier.
And so how much time do you as a board member spend time talking to the other board members for a company when you're not formally in boardrooms, board discussions?
That I would say it varies a lot,
yeah.
Depending on what's going on. And I would say usually it's not that frequent.
Yep.
Unless there's something going on that needs to be discussed. So sometimes one of the companies I'm involved in, we got some financial results recently. Maybe they weren't what we were all expecting. Sure. And we had a couple months have gone by and we weren't expecting, and they were not what we were expecting and hoping for. So then I got a call from another board member, and I called another board member to chat about this and what this means.
Right.
And also ended up chatting with the founding team to get a better sense of what their knowledge was of it.
Yep.
And so sometimes you talk to the founding team first, sometimes you talk to other board members. If there are really important things going on, like follow-on financing rounds, exit discussions,
yep.
Big changes in leadership in different ways. Maybe, you're going through a change in the head of sales or a change in the head of product. You'll probably have more conversations with other VCs. And also, if the company is struggling,
yeah,
and you're going to have to figure out what to do at some point,
yeah,
then you'll have more outside conversations.
We had you on a previous episode, and you made mention of, in some ways, your perspective is helped because you are only seeing a periodic snapshot of that company, whereas the CEO and the operators are in the trenches every day and every week. Mm-hmm. Now, you're also looking at 10, 12, 15 other snapshots throughout every quarter. Mm-hmm. So what does a CEO have to put in that operating team in their update snapshot to help you be most useful in those periods that you are looking at that company?
Yeah, great question. I think about a little bit of a broader question of how do you make really effective use of your board, and how do you make effective use of a board meeting? And when I think about that question, I think, well, the most effective founder and founding teams that I work with figure out how to turn the board meetings into more of a strategy session about the one, sometimes two, but probably one most important thing that they really want feedback on. And the way you would do that is by having investor board package that has enough information that's financial information, performance information about functional units, and that is given to the board well in enough advance. And in some cases, a few of our companies allow board members to even comment on that in advance. And so the founding team knows what those questions are and will answer some of those online through on the document, and then separately send you, okay, here's the deep dive.
Here's some supporting material. Yeah.
Well, they could for the basic questions, but how do you get the most out of the board meeting? And the important discussion is, well, okay, here's the deep dive material after we've gone through the performance.
Yeah.
So
sounds like the most controllable thing I can do as founder CEO is get you the contextual information early enough that you can digest it, give comments, so that the meeting is freed up for us to go deep on a strategy question.
Yes. And it doesn't mean that the meeting you won't end up going deep on a functional thing.
Yep.
Because the founding team may have a strategy question, or the CEO may have a strategy question that they do want the board to go through. But when you look at the functional stuff, you're like, ooh, there's something going on with operations.
Yeah.
This operations, we had talked about it getting more and more productive and more efficient, and that it feels like it's going in that direction. Let's make sure to also do enough of a deep dive there. If the CEO, CFO has been able to give you the materials in advance, then the founding team knows, as you said, you can put together some more supporting materials. But that's what will typically happen at a board meeting is hopefully there's one deep dive topic. Yeah. And then often there may be one other topic that comes out of the supporting materials that you decide you'll go a little bit deeper on at the board meeting. And that's how you can really use that board meeting effectively.
So you mentioned a few moments ago that company, you're spending a lot more time talking to other board members because company's having issues. How do you, and as a board member or in working with other board members, know when it's time to make a change in leadership or the CEO? Like, how do you evaluate that with the periodic interaction beyond just they're not hitting their numbers, right? How do you go beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, generally we really don't want to have to make a change. Just to start with that, like the worst thing.
Which I think a lot of CEOs don't realize that, right? Yeah. Like it's the desire of all investors and board members for you to succeed.
Yeah. Most people's experience as investors, you literally make the most money if the CEO and or a couple members of the founding team can continue to lead the business, and you never have to even think about going through a CEO change. And at the same time, if you do have a business that is, getting larger and larger, the CEO has to be able to, their leadership qualities have to be able to grow to be able to effectively manage larger and larger organization. And so some CEO founders will be able to navigate that, and other CEO founders may not be able to navigate that.
Yeah. And so is it that you are looking at performance? Is it that you're maybe they're performing well and you're like, but they haven't solved that. I mean, I always worry when you have success and you don't know why, because maybe it was an accident, or they a success also covers a lot of sins. And sometimes people don't dig a little deeper when they see success. From the board perspective, how do you, things are going well, and does that hide, or how do you, look behind the curtain?
I mean, I think that it's an important thing to try to do.
Yeah.
And it is true that, sometimes, I think of, various social media platforms, just as an example of this, like, the way that Facebook was very viral, or the way that Twitter was very viral. It's like, it could be going really, really well. And it doesn't mean this, it doesn't mean the CEO is doing that good of a job, because the product itself naturally created all the growth for the business.
Yeah.
I've not been involved in a lot of businesses like that.
Right.
Most of my businesses, it's a lot of blocking and tackling,
pick an axe,
work.
Yeah.
But you will have, businesses here and there where things could look like they're going really well, but you realize, there's some things that, you've pointed out as a board and you've talked to the CEO about that are really important things that seem like they are not getting solved.
Yeah.
And they also, those are things that seem solvable.
Right.
There could be a few things here and there that are not solvable at all, but I think in many cases these are okay, this is a solvable problem. How do we, make operations efficient enough so that, the margins are higher? How do we, whatever list of those things may be, but there's usually a couple things. And that's when you start getting a little clue. It's like, okay, really good CEOs eventually figure out how to solve any big problem for the business.
Right.
They bring in the right people, they bring in the right resources, they make the changes they need to make.
Yeah.
And so that's when you start getting a hint.
Yeah.
And where it's like, okay, we're 12 months.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
12 months after we talked to this, the CEO about go to market and the importance of, the whatever it may be on the marketing function.
Yep.
As an example. And it's really not come along. And so that, we don't really have, it really feels like we don't have good leads that's fed to the salespeople, and the whole growth is not really happening for this reason. We think that we correctly identified what was going on, and maybe there's been fixes, maybe there hasn't, but they haven't been able to solve things that are solvable. So now, what is solvable and what is not?
Right.
Sometimes that may be a little bit in the eye of the holder, but that's, I think that is how board members start getting the sense.
I know I've gotten credit before because I identified the problem, I tried to solve it, knew the solve wasn't working, put in another, try to solve it again, and they're like, okay, I get it, we're churning through, So it's to some degree as a leader, it's just am I trying?
Yeah,
am I going after it? Right.
And sometimes for those, as a CEO, you will. You've identified the problem. The board knows about the problem. You will talk to the board about here's the way that we've decided we think is the fix.
Right.
Let me flush it out with you, and then you try it and it doesn't work. Like, the board has the full context. You clearly tried. Right. You've thought through it. Then you do the afterwards. You're like, okay, well, this is why we think this didn't work.
Yeah.
We're going to try this other thing.
Yep.
Like, that is someone who's trying, is clearly trying to grow.
Yeah.
And you also, having the ability to effectively communicate that to the board.
Right.
So those are some ways that you start identifying early. And, I think the hardest situations are the company's not growing, or it's not doing nearly as well as you had hoped. Is that a CEO issue?
Right.
Is it a market issue? Is it
Right.
a product issue? Is it a sales issue? Like,
Yeah.
you frankly, in our world where a few successes drive a lot of returns, you have a lot of companies that we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But if things are only going so, it's not, it's the last thing you want to do is feel like, oh, I need to change the CEO.
Right.
In order to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Like, let's try to figure out how to get growth going, or these other things, and let's do everything we can.
Yeah.
Before like saying, okay, this is a CEO issue.
And it's always a critical question I ask when I'm on boards is like, is this a market problem or is this an us problem? And that's it. When I was leading a company and I knew we were having issues, I asked the same question, and I showed up at the board meeting saying, here's why it's a market problem. Because I knew you'll all be asking. Let's go back to, we started talking about kind of working with other investor board members, independent board members. So they play a role. They aren't typically needed early on. When is the right time to bring on an independent board member from a board perspective? And what do you look for in that person?
I think, so when do you bring someone on? Somewhat depends on what the needs of the business are.
Yep.
And how important those needs are. And when I say need, it's more something that for some reason the CEO, the founding team may not fully have or fully solved. I can think of a company where, really the company, probably had a sales and go-to-market issue, but it didn't have a product issue because the current customers were really happy. And it also didn't seem like it had a market issue.
Yep.
Because the market was large enough. So what is the problem? Well, we haven't really been able to figure out go-to-market. VCs have different kinds of backgrounds. Some VCs have more of an operating background. Occasionally have a VC who really does have a strong sales background. If I'm on a board and I don't have a strong sales background, but the sales is the issue, like maybe there's an advisor that you can use, but sometimes the most important thing is, well, this is so important. This one thing is so important for the company to have that we're going to bring on this kind of independent board member. And the right independent board member for the early stage company may be different than the right independent board member for a growth stage company.
Yep.
And maybe different for the right independent board member for late stage companies.
Yep.
So you will see certainly early on founders bringing some independent on themselves here and there, and then VCs get involved, and a couple rounds later, maybe you switch those out.
I have actually been on both sides of it, where I've been switched out because it was like, it's time for a different phase. But it's also, I've been brought on because it's like, well, at this stage, we need this skill set, right?
Yeah.
It absolutely
Well,
happens.
I've never switched. We've never switched Corey out, but so maybe you've had that experience. But
yeah, well, but it makes perfect sense, right? At some points in time, it's like, yep, that's beyond that person, right? And you kind of hope the independent has that understanding in their role.
It's the one part that we haven't touched of this dynamic of the CEO, your board, or independents, and the rest of the operations is the rest of the C-suite. And so you mentioned the last thing you want to do is replace the CEO. Is it common, though, once you invest in a founder CEO, that you look across the rest of the executives and you think a piece needs to be added or replaced? And how do you approach that?
I mean, that is one of the things I often think the board may be the most helpful with.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think of many first-time founders in particular, they haven't always seen what good looks like.
Sure.
Yeah.
And some board members have seen a lot more of what good looks like. So what sometimes happens, frankly, after the Series A, which is pretty early stage financing, the new VC that gets involved wants all of the key C-suite members to present to the board.
Yes.
And we want you to go over, go through the metrics for your business and show me, maybe via a dashboard, and kind of work through that. So the board can start getting a sense of, who's doing a really good job of running there, and who knows who's really good and who isn't.
And who's got growth potential as an executive.
And who's got growth potential. Because you'll identify sometimes early on, you think, this person can really grow to be something special. And maybe they're in a certain role.
Interesting. All right. So coaching that individual, they walk into the meeting where you mentioned you want to see the C-suite execs present. How do you, if you were on the side coaching, an individual to go into that meeting, what can they do well? What should they avoid?
I think that they want to have both a strategic view of their function and a detailed view of their function, and a really good understanding of the key performance indicators that are the key successes for their function. I think that is where, you can either live or die. Like, what's the strategy given this organization for my function?
Yep.
Sales, as an example, could look very different for a company that is selling big $1 million plus software contracts.
Yep.
Versus a company that's selling, let's say, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 software contracts.
Yeah.
So you want to understand this overall strategy of the business, the strategy for your units. You want to understand the key performance indicators, also what is going well and what's not going well.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to paint a picture saying like, oh man, we got this covered, don't worry.
Right.
You want to be upfront and say, look, here are the things that we think we've learned, and this. I think
to pause on that, that's the natural instinct, right? You go into a job interview, you want to show everything you can do well, but being assessed by the board, if you don't demonstrate that you understand what's going poorly or not as well, that could actually be the Achilles heel, it sounds like.
It is a big thing, because it's pretty rare that someone feels like, deep down inside, that they're like, this is all covered, it's all good.
Yeah.
And the board always gets a little worried when people aren't, frankly, a little bit neurotic about, what could cause the wheels to fall off the bus in what I'm doing. And there usually is one thing that you have a nagging thing, and I think being honest with the board about it and say, look, the thing we are still struggling with this. This is what we started to try. This is the next thing that we're going to try. Would love input on it. Like, I think it just shows a level of maturity and a level of self-awareness and a level of awareness of whatever you're leading that can be really good. Now, I'm not saying you should go in and say like, this is a mess.
Right.
Everything
right.
But
except unless it's your first board meeting and you're there to fix it all, right? So with that, we're running out of time. We've run out of time. Ira, great stuff. As a matter of fact, I think we've got a lot more we could dig in on boards in the future. So hopefully we have you back in the future. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me in.